Tim Walz is for amnesty for 12 to 20 million people. We should not do this Senate bill. I'm not for illegal immigration amnesty under any circumstances. We need to secure our border. We need to fix our passport and immigration systems. And we need to make sure that the laws, the labor laws and others are enforced properly. Most of those things are the prerogative of the President, the executive branch. The Congress should give the President the tools, and the Speaker of the House, I would encourage him to say that until the President does his job, he's not going to even take up any of those bills.
Thank you. Yeah.
Number one, we need to secure our border. The NSA can systematically follow 350 million cell phones in the United States on a daily basis. I'm sure that we can lock down the 700-mile border on our southern border. That's number one. Number two, we need to figure out who's here. I think, again, you're going to hear a common theme. We all travel together, to the same events. We're all conservative, so the message is going to be the same. But thirdly, we also need to make sure that the e-identify system that's in place for businesses when they go through to find out whether a worker is actually an American citizen or not, we need to make sure that works, because I've heard several times from businessmen that they're actually putting themselves at significant risk because the government website, the government website doesn't work. There's a little theme there, huh? But, a businessman, if they're going through the legal channels of trying to find out whether this employee is an American citizen or not, then the government shouldn't come back and penalize them if the government system doesn't work. But we've got to secure the border, we've got to figure out who's here, and we have to adjust the worker visa permit options.
Thank you. Next, we'll start with Jim, then Mike, then Aaron. And the question is, what should be done about the Farm Bill?
Well, the Farm Bill is going to be enacted here pretty soon. They're going to get that taken care of. Tim Walz says that he's a friend of the farmer. When I announced, I said, you got to do more than vote for the Farm Bill. I want to be on the Agriculture Committee too. I want to work with the people to make sure that agriculture is sustained here in southern Minnesota. It's the backbone of our economy in many ways. A lot of people's jobs, a lot of people's livelihoods count on it. Agriculture is also a national security issue. Where would we be if we had to import our food like we do our oil? Food prices would be up and quality would be down, and we'd have a lot of people unemployed and hurting. But Tim Walz is no friend of the farmer. You got to do more than vote for the Farm Bill. You can't vote for Obamacare and drive up the farmer's cost and say you're his friend. You can't go out and vote for cap and trade, which is going to slap a 5% tax on every farm operation in this district. That's not being a friend of the farmer. Dodd-Frank is not allowing young people to get capital for farming and other farmers to expand. You can't vote for that stuff and be a friend. And these EPA regulations that he passively sits by and watches, he's no friend of the farmer.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, CD1, agriculture is a significant part of the economy. And so I think we're still in a round where Tim Walz had an opportunity. Congressman Walz, why didn't you help, in fact, pass the last bill that left the House of Representatives? We bifurcated the bill. We had the SNAP program, or the food stamp as it usually is called, which is about 80% of the actual agriculture bill, and the other 20%, and we had that figured out. And of course, Tim Walz voted, like he does, 91% of the time, with the party, and didn't vote for the Farm Bill. And we could have had actually a better position if more Democrats would have taken a stance in conference committee with the Senate, if more Democrats would have jumped on and said, we need to get this Farm Bill done, and we need to get this Farm Bill done. And Congressman Walz, there are many other things in terms of this Farm Bill that are important, of course, but the thing that's going to probably invade farms and CD1 the most will be the EPA ruling that we're going to change it from navigable waters to all waters, and we're going to have to worry about chemicals and things is like our ditches along our roads if we're not careful.
Thank you, Mike. Aaron.
Congressman Walz, the Farm Bill is another one of those issues where you were for it before you were against it, before you're for it again. He's back and forth on the Farm Bill, but again, that's one of the groups of folks that he says he tries to support. Except he voted against the Farm Bill when it originally came up earlier this fall, because he said it took out too much of the $40 billion of welfare from that Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. If you really look at limiting the size of government and reducing wasteful spending, why wouldn't that 80% of welfare be open for scrutiny as well. You know, you could go on Craigslist right now in any big city and you can buy the welfare recipient food stamp cards because they're selling them on the internet. And folks, that's how come we're $17 trillion in debt. There needs to be a farm bill, but it should be to support the farmers in southern Minnesota, not that 80% that's out of control in the SNAP program.
Aaron, stay up there. Thank you, Aaron. Next we'll do Eric, Jim, and Mike. So what's your plan for growing jobs?
Well, there's a theme here tonight, but we need to get government out of the economy. You know, anytime that we have the EPA doing what they're doing, it was brought up a little bit ago where they've expanded from navigable waters to all waters. You know, that hurts farmers and it hurts small business from growing. It's that type of overburdensome regulation that we're seeing on a consistent basis from Tim Walz and this administration. Number two, we have to repeal Obamacare. When you sit down with a small businessman or you sit down with a gentleman like I did the other day in Winona that's got 250 employees, and this will be the first time starting in 2014 that their employees have had to pay anything for health care. Now that's pretty significant that he's been able to run his business and pay for the health care for his employees, but not only are they going to have to start paying for it, they went from paying nothing to $150 a month, and their deductibles jumped up from $1,000 a year to $5,000 a year. So talk about hurting the economy. You know, those folks are making good wages, but all of a sudden they've got $150 less in their take-home paycheck on a monthly basis, and they've got $5,000 more in expenses in 2014 for healthcare than they had in 2013.
Thank you, Aaron. Jim.
My belief is that the government should foster business, should have a nice climate for business, things like that. I think broad-based tax reform is very important to help jumpstart the economy, allow people to make decisions based on what's economically viable, what's good for them, and so forth. I gave you a little different answer on how to create jobs in this country. I think our country was put together and became prosperous because we had abundant, reliable sources of energy at very low cost. And what we've done here in the last 20 and 30 years is a disgrace. And what's going on right now with these coal-fired power plant regulations and these other cap-and-trade type things that they're doing through the EPA is going to do nothing but drive up everybody's costs and make us less affluent. We need an energy policy where we're drilling in Alaska, we're drilling on the coast, and we're drilling on federal lands, and we're doing everything we can to get the resources up here and become energy independent. We can do it within a decade. We have more natural resources in the United States than Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq combined. All we got to do is go get it.
Thank you, Jim. Mike.
I'll talk about the same things. First and foremost, it's got to be Obamacare. In the immediate future, the best way to get the economy going again. What's happening right now with the larger business being able to be deferred for another year is you have them waiting to see if whether or not they're going to get some relief from Obamacare. Once that's repealed, you're going to see a lot of new reinvestment. It's got to be the tax code. We've got to close loopholes. I'm not for crony capitalism. We've got to close loopholes, but we also have to reduce the effective rate. We have to reduce the effective rate. The United States has the highest corporate income tax in the world. You don't think that has a suppression effect on creating jobs? One of the things that hasn't been talked about, I'll cover, is the conversation around a living wage. Businesses are absolutely waiting and seeing if whether or not at both a state and a national level, if we're dumb enough to address what is really a problem with not creating jobs in a better sector with allowing for minimum wage to rise to what they call a living wage. That is having a suppressing effect also.
Thank you, Mike. Stay up there, Mike. Next we'll start with Mike, then Aaron, then Jim. What is your opinion of the Paul Ryan, Patty Murray budget deal that we've been reading about this past week?
Well, it's a low opinion. In fact, those would be one of the times that as someone who would stick to their principles and would go to Washington and say, if I'm for limited government, if I'm for free markets, if I'm for all the things that I ran on, I'm going to have a hard time voting for a bill that actually raises the budget by another $50 million. I have no reason, everybody here probably knows that the reason why that bill was passed the way it was is that we can focus all of our attention on Obamacare for the next year. So we got out of Dodge without having another government shutdown, which drove the unfavorable rating of Congress to 70%. And now what we're faced with is praying that in this next election cycle, we're going to make the best case for defeating Obamacare, and we're going to elect enough senators to the Senate so that we can get a majority and then do a real good job of addressing the budget.
Thank you, Mike. Aaron.
I have a low opinion of it as well for a couple of different reasons. First of all, reading from Senator Coburn's waste book, here's a couple more. Government study to find out that wives should calm down in an argument, $400,000. $1 million bus stops in Arlington, Virginia. Life coaches for Senate staff, $2 million. People, the new budget that Ryan and Murray pushed through does nothing to address the wasteful spending that we see coming out of Washington, D.C. Number one. Number two, they settled the deal on Tuesday night and the House voted for it on Wednesday. That's another example of you're going to have to pass it to see what's in it. How did those congressmen, those elected representatives that are tasked with the responsibility of managing our finances of this country, how did they read that? They didn't. It's just like Obamacare. No one read it. And the last thing, real quick, is they're trying to balance the budget by giving back sequester cuts. Well, actually, they're adding to the deficit. And how they did that was by reducing veterans' benefits by 1%, yet they allowed federal employees to have their same cost of living. Everybody needs to take a haircut in Washington, D.C., and if you're going to single out one group, it should be all the groups that need to be cut.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, everyone would know my position if you went to my website, because the day of that vote I issued a press release letting people know and letting the media know what my position on it was. Of course, no, I wouldn't vote for it because I thought it was a political strategy more than a serious way to cut the deficit. When I was out in Washington, I worked for the Treasury Department, an executive job there, and actually identified some waste in my own agency. I convinced my boss that we needed to go do something about that. He said, well, Hagedorn, if you can get a bill passed to do that, more power to you. 3 years later, we got a bill passed. We closed 4 government check writing centers. We eliminated 100 bureaucrat jobs. We saved this country over $1.5 billion. That's the type of mentality I bring to this race. That's the type of work effort that I do, the conservative type stuff, when nobody was looking. I wasn't running for Congress back then. I was just doing the right thing. Well, that's what we need in Washington. We need more people that are willing to do the right thing. Let me tell you something. It is not easy to cut spending in Washington. It is not easy to go against the bureaucracy. You have to fight and fight and fight and fight. It takes people with perseverance, people that want to do it. Send me there. I'd like to do it.
Jim, stay up there. We're going to go into the final round of questions here. And in this round of questions, each of the candidates gets to ask the other candidates a question. I will sequence it so that it is as fair as I can. It is about 7 after 8. We'll try and wrap it up right after this.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, first question is for Mike.
Mike, well, I'm not here today to cut into other Republicans. My target is Tim Walz. These are my competitors, and so I'm not going to ask any pointed questions of my Republican competitors. I'd just like to say, Mike, is there something tonight that you wanted to talk about that they didn't ask you about?
That was actually pretty stand up, and I thank you for that. That was pretty softball. I've been on the campaign trail. I've been on the campaign trail for 3 years, and I would say that, and after taking lots and lots of votes, very conservative votes, there is very little that you don't know about me. And most of you, if not all of you, in fact, or many of you, are even in my district, so I've knocked on your doors, and I've talked to you about what's important in my fence. And so there's very little that I can talk about tonight other than the fact that I think that this is the year that we're going to do it. In 2010, when I took on Andy Welty, actually very popular Democrat from 30B, it was the same thing that was going on here tonight, and this next election cycle. People were fed up with the federal government. That was the first time they passed the Obamacare, and people were saying no to big government. And we had that opportunity again, folks. We're going to take this seat from Tim Walz.
Mike, you have a question for Aaron?
Wow, and you know what? It almost seemed like it'd be terrible, wouldn't it, if I didn't throw him a softball? Okay, how about this one, Aaron? I've already said that I have 3 years of legislative experience and some I think, real valuable lessons learned in terms of how to navigate within the caucus and still make a point and stay to my conservative principles. How do you see being able to do that as a freshman?
Well, thanks. That was kind of a softball question, actually, when we look at it. You know, I'm not going to run from the fact that I have no elected public office experience. I'm not. Because I'm running on the fact that I have private sector experience. And I think that Washington, D.C. needs a little bit more of me and a lot less of folks that know how Washington runs. That's what got us in the problem that we're in, number one. But number two, I think that if you surround yourself with folks, a good team like I've done, you know, when I announced on August 6th, that wasn't the first day that we decided to jump into the race. We started looking at this campaign 7 days after the election last year. I got a text message that said, "Aaron, are you ready to run in 2014? And it took us from that point in time with my family and I, and my wife and I praying about it, and our family making the decision that it was the right time to do it because the country was on the wrong track. And at that point in time, in the spring, we decided that if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We hired a campaign manager. We hired one of the best campaign consultants in the back there. We put together a finance and fundraising team, and we had a treasurer the day we launched. And the reason we did that was because I haven't run for office before, and I thought it was important to surround myself with professionals that know how politics work in southern Minnesota and know how the system works. I'm the only candidate up here right now that on April 6th, that's the day after the endorsement convention, is able to immediately expand my campaign to run a general campaign against Tim Walz, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Question for Jim.
Well, in sticking with that theme, Jim, I would ask you, you've got a lot of experience in Washington, D.C. You've highlighted some of that tonight. Do you think that your lack of private sector experience will hurt you in the race against him?
Well, I have some private sector experience. As a matter of fact, one of my business partners is here tonight, or former business partner. It's a good question, but I think in a lot of ways it's an advantage. Had some unique opportunities in my life. My father was a congressman. I worked for a congressman and had some experience in the bureaucracy where I reformed government. And at all stages, it helps me. Helps me know how to run the race. I would say, Aaron, right now, I'm running the race. I'm out there taking on the congressman, getting in his face, issuing things, getting in the newspaper. We did 24 interviews with newspaper people. That's how you establish your relationships. That's how you get your name out. That's how you're able to get your message out. I did my 19th radio interview today. And in those radio interviews and what we do, we take on the guy. We say, you know, on gun control, is he really for gun control? I mean, is he really a gun advocate? So, well, after the Connecticut shootings, Congressman Walz said that he was open to the gun control policies of Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. And I said, just for being open to those gun control policies, you should be open to kicking him out of office. So I think I have an understanding how to run a race, and that's a plus.
Jim, question for Aaron.
Again, Aaron, I defer. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? You know, if we're gonna go that way, I'd say, what have you done since you announced in order to attack Tim Walz, go after him in public, take the race to Tim Walz?
That is a good question. You know, one of the important things that we felt all along was that we can't have a repeat of 2012. And what happened with 2012 is we didn't have an endorsed candidate coming out of the endorsement convention, and so we had two Republicans running against each other all summer long, violating Reagan's 11th commandment, which is thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. And so by the time we had the primary in August, Mike and Alan had beat themselves up so badly and spent so much money to win the primary that how are you going to turn around and run a general election against Tim Walz? And so we stated on the first day that we were going to abide by the endorsement because my goal is to defeat Tim Walz next November. One of the three of us will do that. And I think the first step to doing that is staying united as a party and uniting everybody that has an R behind their name. Because not only are we going to need all the R's, we're also going to need some of the folks that have I's behind their name as well. And so what I've been doing over the last 4 months or so is I've been going into every delegate home, that whether they're a delegate now or they're likely to be a delegate, and I'm sitting down with them at their kitchen tables and their coffee tables, and I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aaron Miller, and here is why I'm the best candidate to defeat Tim Walz.
Aaron, question for Mike.
Okay. This question had to get asked at some point in time. Again, Mike has a lot of experience. He's been in St. Paul, doing a fantastic job. Talked about conservative messages. I believe firmly that past history is a good indicator of future activity. And I got a question on a vote you made. You were a sponsor of a bill that raised a cigarette tax. Now, I think that that's a liberal big government answer or a liberal big government solution to a problem. We don't need that in Washington.
I'm glad you brought it up because we can clear the air tonight. First of all, if you know my past at all, you know I lost my first wife to cancer 25 years ago. So it is very near and dear to my heart to do something with cancer. So I was asked if I would sponsor a bill in the House, and I did, with a caveat, because I had signed a statement that I wouldn't raise taxes on people. The only way that I would raise taxes on cigarettes is if they put those taxes back in the pocket of the people we took it out with a break in another way. Right? So, since they weren't able to do that, it never even made it into committee. I never even pushed it into committee. And when that same bill came in, the tax plan this year, I voted no against it. Folks, I have taken more votes against raising taxes on people than any of the other two folks that are sitting here behind me tonight. I've taken more votes and sponsored more bills to limit the size of government than either of the guys sitting here behind me tonight. All right, thank you.
And you get the last question, Mike, for Jim.
Wow, now that's even harder because the first one was such a softball. But Jim, you know, one of the things that you say is about how much you've been out in campaign, and I just want to question you on one thing. You're the last one to get in, and one of the things that's going to absolutely take is we're going to have to raise a whole lot of money in order to beat Tim Walz. In fact,
what are you talking about, sir? What you need for races?
Sandy, let him finish his statement.
but we're going to need to raise about $1.2 million as an estimate, Sandy, in order to get this done right. Well, on your first financial statement, you had a goose egg. So it's going to be great, if when we leave this reporting quarter that's coming up in December the 31st, that we have at least raised more than the last person that had a real shot, and that was Randy Demmer 4 years ago. My campaign will have raised at least 80% more than Randy Demmer did from outside sources 4 years ago. So where are you at?
Okay.
Well, you'll find out in about 2 weeks when I report. It's going to take about $1 million to run the race. I figure about half of that's got to come from outside the state of Minnesota. Some of that's going to have to come from Washington, D.C. Sometimes connections aren't all bad. Anyway, to run this nomination race, it takes $75,000 to $100,000. I'll raise that. We're running a full race. I can tell you, I got enough gas in the car to get home tonight, Mike, so I know you're worried about me. But what I'm talking about when I say running the race and cutting into the walls, body punching Tim Walz, letting people know about his liberal record, getting your name out there, increasing your name ID like we're doing. The reason that's important, in 2005, at this point in the race, Congressman Walz, Tim Walz, had been in for 10 months. He'd been running a race for 10 months. Out there body punching Gil Goodman, getting it on the way. If you're not running the race now and laying the groundwork for the general election next year, you're not going to win. This race can't start in April and May and expect to take your name ID from 0 or 15 and go to 100. It doesn't work that way. So that's why I've been out there working so hard.
Okay. That ends that round of questions. I have one yes/no question for you. Start with Jim, then Mike, then Aaron. If elected, will you join the House Tea Party caucus?
Well, sure. Maybe I'll need the chairman. Who knows? I think there's lots of great groups out there, caucuses and so forth, that people to be with. The key thing is this. We talk about who are you going to support for speaker when you get there. What coalitions you're going to be with. Look, I'm a conservative Republican that gets it. Our party had an opportunity 10 years ago to control everything. We didn't exactly do conservatism. We didn't exactly handle things the way I think we should have. We've learned valuable lessons, at least I have. I'm going out there to take the powers away from Washington, to make myself less important, and to do the types of things that you're looking at, the types of things I've already done. But let me tell you who I won't vote for Speaker. Nancy Pelosi. I will never vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. And here's Congressman Walz, part of the Democrat National Congressional Committee's Frontline program. He's out there on the front lines for Nancy Pelosi to make her Speaker. so she can get him to vote for more bills before he reads the bill or